point. Is that right, Julia?
That is correct.
And do we have anybody else online?
We
Oh, we
have
have a-
6 attendees in the participants panel. I just want to make sure that they can hear us. So if there's any way we can have someone raise their hand from the attendees to signal that they're able to hear us well.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for attending remotely. I'm going to do a roll call. So as I call your name, please signify by saying aye. Susan Bryant,
Hi.
Lori Gibbons,
Aye.
Derek Goodwin, Lisa Hewitt-Dick,
Aye.
Sean Keneally, Mike Sardina,
Here.
Martin St. John, and our newest member, Jake Wheelwright.
Aye.
Welcome. So I just want to touch on the agenda today. We're we're going to review the minutes as we normally would, have just some brief Harbor Committee administration, and then ask Lori to give a Harbor Master's report. I'm going to give just a very quick overview of the select board meeting that happened since our last meeting and what we shared and discussed there. Then spend a few minutes with the help of Mike Sardina talking on the continuing top priority of this committee, which is climate resilience around Cohasset Harbor. And then we have an oyster farming update, and we are joined today in the room by Greg Wallingford and Jamie Davenport, who will be on. That's what we're doing. So the first order of business, let me see, I think I have, no, minutes. Where do I have minutes? Thought I had minutes. I do have minutes. Welcome, welcome.
Sorry,
Derek.
late.
No, you're came in right at the right time. I sent out the minutes via email, and I guess I would entertain a motion to accept the minute.
I move to accept the minutes of, what was the date? From
November
11/20/24.
Thank you.
Second.
Is there discussion? Have you had a chance to read them? Discussion, changes, any comments? Hearing none. All in favor of accepting the minutes signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, the minutes are accepted unanimously. Thank you. From just a couple points, and we're moving through the agenda. This is great. The love it. Harbor Committee Administration. So we have a meeting schedule. We have tried to adhere as closely as we can to sort of a set schedule of the third Wednesday of every odd month. And at 7 o'clock, just so that it's, people can set their calendars. There have been a little bit of changes because Julia is sort of sharing Zoom and other stuff and times with the planning board, right? So we've made some adjustments. So I guess I would ask members of the Harbor Committee, please look at the dates on this agenda and please block them out on your calendars for the future so that I think they generally adhere to what I've described, but
They're all Wednesdays at 7 o'clock.
they are, but they're not always the third Wednesday.
Oh, okay.
That's I think September 10th is not a third Wednesday, and November 12th is not a third Wednesday. So that's just a little bit of a change. And then the other thing, I think we've all got a notice from probably the town clerk that it's we're required to take conflict of interest law training every 2 years. So just to a reminder, look forward to having everybody fully trained on that. And that's it.
Did you want to, I thought, when I first saw that agenda item, I was thinking that was also reporting on the open meeting law training that we went to.
It's
Uh,
pretty much the same training, I think.
Well, I didn't, but
So I can share a couple of points from that. It's pretty complex. I would say we have not been adhering to what we should have been adhering to as far as the open meeting law goes, me not being a lawyer, I think of what is the most important essential thing to remember. And the idea of the open meeting law is that we don't get things done outside of the meeting. And the reason for that is because that's not transparent. So that's not like the full transparency of the democracy the way it was designed to be. So we are to have those conversations where we actually get things done in the public meeting with the agenda, within the agenda that has been published. And ideally, the agenda has been published 48 hours in advance. So that means if you have something to submit to the agenda, you should think about that more than 48 hours in advance of the meeting so that it can get into the agenda and then we can actually have a conversation. So the open meeting law training session was quite long and there was a lot about how all the things that you can't do. So as you might imagine, I was the one saying, well, okay, I get that, but what is it? How do we actually get anything done? Because remember, we had thought it would be helpful to have subcommittee.
I think the subcommittee, so if I may interrupt, is a different.
But we're posting.
No,
We're-
right,
we're-
they-
No,
Posting.
we post them
So-
when we have those.
So what we were hoping, I think that first time we set up subcommittees was that it'd be a nice, effective way to get things done because it's smaller and you don't have to be so formal about it. I was told that that was wrong. That in fact, if we have a subcommittee of 3 people and 2 people have a conversation, that's a majority. And so that needs to happen with an agenda and a published notification so that others can participate in it and it's 100% transparent. So I was surprised to hear.
That's what we've been doing.
Yeah, I want to back
So
up
the-
because I don't want to say that we've been breaking the open meeting law,
No.
frankly. Just for context, I am a general counsel for state agency. I've been deeply trained in this. And so it concerns me that, we may have that misinterpretation. I think anytime we've had any deliberative discussion,
Subcommittee meetings.
subcommittee meetings, we have posted them and been here, like the 3 of us, when we did that.
Yeah, those were all
community-
posted meetings
Posted, they were all posted
and with minutes.
and minutes. So now if we want to talk about this at length, or if you want to give us examples, I think we should put it on the agenda for the next time, but I certainly don't think that we've been breaking it. And I'm not the final word. We can go to the State Ethics Committee if you'd like.
No,
but-
I'm
but I
not,
think
no,
that-
I'm not trying to accuse anybody. I'm feeling like
Well, we all have responsibilities
was-
under this.
it
under
was
this
helpful
statute.
for me to hear it all and be reminded that, oh, I have to be careful. Like, I know you guys socially and I see you in CMI. I have to be careful about having conversations about anything about the harbor that falls into the jurisdiction of this. So we have some freedom because we're not, we don't have that much authority as a harbor committee. But we do have to be careful about having what I think of as really wonderful, congenial conversations with people about stuff that we care about in the harbor. So having a refresher about those laws was important.
Mhm.
I felt like I learned a lot and I was like, okay, I'm going to try to be better about this. So I'm just sharing what I found. And I want to be able to not only abide by the law and not because the Attorney General is going to take me to jail, but guys, it's the right thing to do. And then I also want to be able to work effectively. So I want to make sure that when we have the opportunity to deliberate, which is in these meetings, we don't shut each other down based on something else. So I think we're in a good space going forward. I just thought I spent a lot of time sitting in that training, and part of it was because I had said I could use a refresher on it. So I'm grateful that the town provided that, and I just wanted to share what I had learned from it in case anybody else was as in the dark about it as I had.
Thank you.
Thanks.
I think that covers our administrative items and now we're on to Harbor Master report. And Lori, you have the floor. Welcome.
It's very quiet. Season's over.
Nice and cold.
Just a few fishermen still, few lobstermen still working. But they're getting ready to shut down unless they have special permits from the state. That's about it.
So can I ask you a question about what we discussed yesterday? So something that is, I guess, coming through in capital budget this year before town meeting is a request for funding to build the new to replace the harbor master's house. office, harbor master's office at on Government Island. And I talked with David Farag,
Mhm.
contacted me yesterday and described this a little bit, but thinks, anything that we want to have done that is good for the harbor needs advocacy. And so I thought, anyway, it would be helpful. Lori, can you maybe describe what the budget request was to the best of your knowledge and what is being proposed for the harbor master's office?
The budget request was 300,000. It's a one-floor building. It'll be basically double the size that we have right now. And it'll also include a bathroom for transient boaters, which will include a shower. It will enlarge the office area. There'll be a file room where we can put all open up the office a bit. It's
Mhm.
really crowded in there. And we're hoping to have Votech build it. They're very interested in building it.
That's great.
They'll build the building. They will do the electrical work. And I believe the HVAC work. They do not tear down the building. They do not do the site prep. They don't do foundations or insulation or plumbing.
Mhm.
We have to get outside plumbers for, outside people to do that stuff.
Is there plumbing to the building now? Is there?
Yes, there's a bathroom in it
Okay.
there right now. So it's just expanding on what we have.
Yeah. So, and so it sounds like this would be both a combination of the sort of typical Cohasset procurement process to do those things that Votech doesn't do, right? To get
Correct.
contractors to do that work.
The plumber already is under contract with the town.
And the foundation and demolition, et cetera, would be contracted out under the contracting process.
If it needs to go to bid, it'll go to bid. I don't believe it will.
Okay,
I'm waiting to meet with somebody
okay.
in regards to that.
And is this grant funded or town funded?
Town funded.
Because you
Yeah.
seems like you have some matching in-kind work there from Votech.
Well, Votech will put up the building. We pay for the supplies.
Still
They
pretty good.
provide the labor.
It's nice.
Yeah.
And the town pays for every student who goes from Cohasset to the VOTEC.
Right.
So Lori, I guess I'm trying to understand in terms of the financial request that's gone through to Michelle and to Chris. And the idea then is that gets put forth to the capital budget committee and they need to review it and probably meet with you and whoever they need to meet with to vet the request
And advisory.
And advisory,
and
yeah.
advisor. And that's still in,
And then the select.
that's still in the future, correct?
Yes.
Yeah.
Are you shooting for a spring town meeting for the funding?
I would like it
Yeah.
if we could,
Yeah,
but if not, we'll,
Right.
put it off. But Votech has said that they could start it
Mhm.
this upcoming fall,
Be great.
which I don't know if we can get everything lined
lined
up
up.
for that. Cause, we'd
That's
have
great.
to have it later fall.
Just out of curiosity, what would you do temporarily while it's being
Depending upon,
reconstructed for offices?
depending upon the time of the year, it would probably just get an office trailer,
Okay.
work out of that.
And what could we do to help that process along? Rally people to vote for it?
I believe the police and fire department are putting in building requests. And I'm just gonna be folded in with them as
Mhm.
public safety.
Great.
So,
Awesome.
Lori, in terms of the facilities for transient boaters who take showers, is that ask an obvious question, but is that a typical nice amenity that is offered to transient boaters who cruise the waters of Cohasset, of New England?
Yeah, to a certain, most harbors have shower facilities, but Most of the boats that visit have showers on board already, so, you know, they're pretty big boats.
Mm-hmm. And in terms of the amount of, regardless of whether they do or don't have facilities on board, what is the type of metrics? How many transient boats come through in a season that stay overnight?
Oh, in the past, several hundred,
Several hundred of summer?
Oh, wow.
but I don't know what the future's gonna hold.
Understood. But at least those people who like to park their boat in the Cohasset Harbor, that's 200 transient boaters, give or take.
If we
Yeah.
have transient moorings
Yes.
available.
And this summer, you were managing all the transient moorings.
Mhm.
You were managing those, correct?
Yeah.
Okay. Awesome.
All right, would that also be another public bathroom on the water, on the waterfront?
It would be, but
Yeah.
it'll be locked up.
Yeah.
You'd have to come in and get the key. With the bridge right next to us, that place would get trashed by the kids. So I have to keep it locked.
Yep.
And what is the plan for maintaining and cleaning the bathroom on occasion? Who's
Oh, I don't-
responsible for that?
We'll worry about that when we come to it. We take care of our office as it is right now.
Okay.
So
So right now, yet absent anything else, you and your crew would be responsible for keeping that
correct.
maintained.
Yeah.
Okay. What a recommendation was from the select board is understanding from the harbor committee what we think of this proposal. And to vote in approval for it or not. And so what I would.
Build a new harbor master's.
To be in
Office?
support of building a new harbor master's office. Yeah. It's a start. I mean, I think and I'll get to that. I think the idea is that there's gonna be the normal Q&A in town meeting. And when this happens, it's gonna be helpful to know that harbor committee is for, against it, advisory, all those committees are for, or against it. So our vote matters to that extent. And then to the degree that we may or may not need, as the months play out, to advocate for this even more, it'll be helpful to know that the harbor committee was behind it. Lisa, are you coming back? Because I'm going to make a motion. Maybe she'll be back. Why don't I'll wait on that for a minute, just so that we have the full harbor committee that's here. Lisa, I'm about to make a motion and wanted you to move for it.
Second.
So I move that the harbor committee is in full support of building a new harbor master's office on Government Island as soon as practical. That's my motion.
Second.
Is there any further discussion? Any questions about that? Then, as for a vote, all in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Then Harbor Committee is unanimously behind this plan. Thank you, Lori.
Yeah, and Laurie, tell us if, there's any meetings we can go to or letters we can submit, as it goes along, if it makes sense.
Where it's being put in with all the police and fire. I think it'll, 300,000 compared to their millions is.
Yours is like this. Tail on the dog.
And it's specifically for building, not for any equipment. Right?
For the office, yeah.
For the office,
Oh, so it could include computer stuff and useful.
that I fall under IT for that.
Okay.
So,
Yeah.
no, it'd be the building.
Building and furniture and, but nothing boat related, nothing.
We've got furniture and file cabinets and everything.
Terrific. Thank you. Then the next topic, and we are just following on time. I'm going to share my screen again. And going to talk about the select board update. I need to make this a little smaller. Hold on just a moment. Okay. So I'm not going to go through this in detail, but since we last met, in our last meeting, we talked about what we were going to say to the select board. And I just want to touch on a couple of items. The highlight was climate resilience. We also, we shared the Cohasset Harbor rec survey, talked about Captain's Walk improvements and the Harbor Committee priorities. Those were the topics. So today I'm not going to touch on rec survey or Captain's Walk improvements again. I will touch on Harbor Committee priorities, and then we have another topic on climate resilience. I do want to make a plug for what I think is a great service to the town ever since Cohasset Mariner went away. We have CohassetAnchor.com, and they are doing a nice job of covering governmental issues. And if you really want to know what happened at the select board update, this is a better article than I could have ever written by Carol Britton-Meyer. So I encourage anybody who has questions or wasn't able to attend that meeting and wants to know what it was about. This is just a promotion for it, but you can just Google Cohasset Anchor and go see that. And chances are that, there could be an article coming out of this meeting in Cohasset Anchor 2, whether the reporter is viewing this today or whether they look at the YouTube that we'll be capturing. So it's a nice service for the town. I just wanted to promote that. What I did review, and again, won't go through these in details, but it's good to keep these, I think, in front of the Harbor Committee at all times. I shared with Select Board that our top priority is climate resilience and the risk mitigation that goes with that. We certainly have opportunities, well, the others, Captain's Walk, Government Island Pier, dredging, participating in MVP, Cohasset Harbor bylaws, and then making sure that Harbor Committee related projects are included in the town of Cohasset budget and capital forecasts. So that was, to the degree that we can influence the successful gaining of those funds and the building of that, we want to do everything we can. That's a priority of this committee. Getting back to the Captain's Walk, I think we saw that again in the news, the Eastwick Inn looks like went through most of the approvals, a lot of the approvals, and is going to move forward pretty much, I think, as we understood it in earlier meetings, that potentially is a really nice improvement to public access to the harbor, because they're building some big wharfs and walkways where there's currently really is an industrial site in words. So that's again not something we're influencing, but an objective. Mike has been at this for a couple of years, is looking at any opportunities we could have to influence planning board, zoning board, and others to create a better pedestrian experience around the harbor. And I think in discussion with David Farag yesterday, we're aware, all these really nice retail and residential developments are going to be coming online already this year. With Cove, coming up with Cohasset Wharf, coming up with this, it's going to put, a lot more pressure on, and good pressure on having a good Captain's Walk. It'll put a lot of pressure on parking, which we don't have an answer for, but that's something also to look at. So this is what we reviewed, and I'll thank you just a minute. And the select board was, not surprisingly, happy that we're focused on this stuff, didn't have any additional suggestions. Greg, you had a question.
Just, are there plans available to view of the Eastwick Inn?
Yeah.
So are they gonna raise the buildings that are there, a portion of those buildings? And Eastwick Inn, are they gonna work with what they have?
They do. I don't have the links here, but I think the planning board, there's a whole set of links to very detailed plans,
Oh.
including pictures. They are raising them. I've looked at it and think, based on the projections we see from the Coastal Zone Management, Woods Hole Group, it would be good to have them raised more, but they're building them to code, or to whatever the current code is. So that's their call.
Yeah, the big building where which has the big deck, they're actually literally raising that building. The other one, towards Atlantica,
Mhm.
that's independent, they're literally raising it.
We're tearing it.
Yeah, I was gonna say raise.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And they're gonna literally up almost the whole floor so you can park underneath of it.
Well, the building deck it's been unoccupied, but it's a pretty new building. It's
Yeah.
structurally sound. Just a
Yeah.
warehouse basically, but the deck on the back is beautiful.
Yeah, and it'll be publicly accessible.
That's great.
You know, I mean,
They're connecting it around the backside of the other one over to the
Yeah.
sidewalk that goes towards Atlantica.
I mean, it's, I think we've saw it, it's a nice design. It is driven by Chapter 91. Anybody doing development on the harbor has to allow public access.
It's the water side.
And they, in Q&A, it even came up. So if somebody wants to cast fishing line off their deck, can they do
Mhm.
that? And the answer was,
Good.
they can. So anyway, this was reviewed, Harbor Committees, the Select Board was favorable to our efforts. I just want to share, they at least expressed appreciation for our focus on climate resilience and on one of the key objectives was to really bring to light, and I'll show it in a minute, the results of the Woods Hole Group and Weston and Sampson studies that completed in June, which I think for those of us who were there, we noticed none of the select board was able to attend, so that they weren't necessarily aware of some of the findings there. Actually, I'm going to go through, so I'm going to switch to the next agenda item. And I think we're still roughly on schedule. And Mike, I'm going to call on you in a minute, but I want to highlight a couple of things. So we shared this. This is what we shared with Select Board. And so wanted to really make a headline of this. What you're looking at, again, over here, if I can point with my mouse, is it doing it? Sort of. Come on. Well, I'm trying to show it, but I can't very well. There's Cohasset Harbor. And what this is showing is present day, this is the flood risk for Cohasset Harbor. Again, I'm not going to go into detail because today's not about really zeroing in on this. I have a couple of other things to show. But the areas of greatest risk for flooding in Cohasset are Cohasset Cove, and then call it the back door going up the Gulf River and then down Black Horse Lane. And when I say flooding risk, the focus is protecting the town and town infrastructure. So it's the wastewater treatment plant, the public safety building, and the village. There's a whole lot of everything else in Cohasset at risk too, but that's not the focus of the current grants that have been ordered. In 2030, we show a much greater risk. And again, I've been through these slides before, so my objective actually is not to go through these. I wanted to point out that where this information is available. So on the state of Massachusetts Coastal Zone Management website, I'm going to just go over and show it. On this website, you just Google it, and it's also in the article that was written for the select board. There's the links to it. They've done a really nice job of bringing all this stuff to life. I'm showing it in just static PowerPoint slides, but it's much better than that. This is publicly available, state of Massachusetts. It's a GIS project. And if you look at this is just zeroing in on, you can look at the whole Massachusetts coastline here. You can look at your individual street. You can look at Parker Avenue. You can look at anything you want and see what the chances are by 2030 of what a 100-year storm might do for flooding. So again, looking at this is exactly the pictures that we've been showing and using with the select board. Specifically, here's Black Horse Lane. This is the Gulf River, the Border Street Bridge. The black means this is filled with water. We know this is filled with water today. In a 100-year storm, it goes over this private driveway into this swampy area, and this gets filled with water. And to the tune of, even in 2030, this is to a depth of potentially 10 feet. and that's all the description of this is the flood depths. If I can just go down, flood depth scenarios show the relative depth of water above land during a coastal flooding event. So all this stuff is explained. And then, so this is Black Horse Lane. This is looking at what might happen if that same flood overtops the cove area. Here's the probably the area that is now occupied by Harbor Cohasset. It's a little higher than this right now. We've noted that. And then it floods Jacobs Meadow and, reaches all the way through to Summer Street and floods across the way and potentially up to the tracks. Then looking further, so, here we are 2025. If you look at what a 100-year storm might look like 25 years from now, which is still within many of our lifetimes, I think, this is a pretty significantly bigger problem. And again, zeroing in on it, here's Black Horse Lane under close to 8 to 10 feet of water, Summer Street inundated. We've got the railroad tracks are compromised, and downtown is flooded as well. So the focus, again, of this harbor committee is we're sort of zeroing in on this because it's at the harbor where you can do some risk mitigation here. I wanted to point this out because this is not my tool. This is a tool that's publicly available that is exactly the slides, exactly the tool that the consultants, it was Woods Hole Group who developed this, and they were the ones who did the work for us. So this is out there. I think what's interesting about it, if you want to look at what happens on Parker Avenue or what happens over on Margin Street, you can see all that too. And I think it's going to be largely up to homeowners to, make their own homes resilient. And the town has to figure out whether it's going to react to a catastrophe or whether it's going to get in front of a catastrophe. But I think anyway, that is, I just wanted to make a plug for the publicly available resources that are out there. What we showed, we summarized to the select board. This is from the select board presentation. I think it's big enough. We showed the scenarios that the consultants, that the Woods Hole Group and Weston and Sampson presented in their final report on June 26th, 24. So about 6 months ago. And they presented for the Cove several different options to consider. And what we talked about in our last meeting, and this is thanks to some of the good work of Mike Sardina, we also looked at another solution. And the thinking is, and we've talked with the consultants, is they really only focused on solutions that were in the public domain, that is based on land owned by Cohasset. And what we've seen is we think there may be opportunities that are potentially effective and possibly less expensive if you can do things on private property. Not to go into detail because we don't have a lot more to say about it today, but there's an opportunity to leverage the high ground that was created by the condominiums at the Cove. They already are at 13 feet. They're essentially damming up part of the end of the Cove and then extend and heighten some of the stone walls that extend past there to create a barrier at the Cove. Anytime we do that, of course, you have to look at tide gates and what's going to happen if there's storm water or if water gets over that, what's going to happen with that water, because you don't want to dam it back into Jacobs Meadow any more than you have to. Focus of today's, I guess, a little bit of new information is the second area of risk is Black Horse Lane. Again, at the end of in Black Horse Lane and Summer Street, the residents, there's a handful of residents who are actually quite engaged and involved in this because they very much live the tides that happen over there. And there already is there's flooding of backyards. There's near flooding of the roadways at Black Horse Lane quite a bit. What we explored, and this is Mike and I had a chance to do a walk of Black Horse Lane this week with one of the residents there. And we were trying to see, what could you do possibly by instead of building essentially a dam or a berm or a set of walls and raising the height of Summer Street, which is what was proposed out of the June 26th. That's what these concepts are: super elevating Summer Street, retaining wall and earthen berm again in Summer Street, and then doing some combination. Pretty tricky to do that because there's a lot of driveways that intersect there, and there's some questions about how you, in a storm event, how you close that off. We were looking at what happens if you move out along Black Horse Lane and potentially focus the efforts of holding back the water on this area. So this is a picture we're showing. This is from Muni Mapper, also on the cohassetmass.org website, showing Black Horse Lane. And there's a causeway that goes across this sea marsh area to high ground over here. And then there's high ground over here. And we are, I guess, just identifying, it's all private property. So there's nothing done deal about this at all, but we're wanting to explore all possible options because the study that completed in June only focused on solutions that were along the public ways of Cohasset. Interestingly, their solution, which is if in a huge rain and storm event, they would basically build a dam along Summer Street. Yes, that protects the town. It also creates a nice big lake over here on the other side of the dam. That would be all of the Black Horse Lane residents and also some Summer Street residents. If we bring this, if you keep this picture in your mind's eye a sec, I'm just going to come back to here. This is exactly what I just showed. If this thing will refresh. Let me this picture and this picture are the same. So showing, if there was an opportunity to create some climate resilience features, a higher roadway, tide gate, this is the type of, all this area that's currently being flooded would be protected potentially. Mike, can I ask you to share maybe a little bit of thinking about what we saw there and maybe what some next steps are as it relates to that, or not?
Well, I think going back to the presentation to the select board, they frankly gave us 15 minutes. Fortunately, they gave us
I
on the
took their-
schedule, but George talking got us up to 45 minutes. But relative to the slides that he was showing regarding the resiliency of both the Cove and Black Horse Lane, most of the conversation, most of the presentation was about what had been presented by the consultants and not so much about what alternatives there are. So in one respect, we're hoping that our next step is to get various entities aware that there are other alternatives potentially that should be explored, because the only alternative that was provided were conceptual plans in the public right of way. I think raising roads around the Cove, literally on the outside of the condominiums, raising those 3-4 feet is a disaster. But the condominiums themselves are already a dam because they were built high enough to meet the requirements that this particular consultancy was suggesting. At elevation 12.8, the buildings were at, the finished floors are at 13, not the garage, but the main living floors. So that drawing on the bottom corner there, for instance, shows, it's actually an aerial photo, it shows that the road is of Martin Street is at 13. 13 crosses over and goes all the way around the length of the perimeter of the building. including the high ground where the swimming pool is. That leaves a little gap between the public parking lot,
Sorry, I'm just trying to make it. Trying to. make-
public parking lot and the high ground over on Border Street.
All right, sorry about that, Mike. There we go. So 13.
So the
feet
solution
here.
there is you raise this very small section of Border Street. You literally put a hump in it. Most of that, right there where his cursor is, the road is already at elevation 10 or 10 and a half. The target is 12.8 or 13. So you raise it up a couple feet and you connect across to basically the green lawns that you see there in that aerial photo by just increasing the heights of the walls that are seat walls, if you will, and you've got it blocked off. And you don't have to raise the road. You don't have to do a whole lot of other stuff to protect the town. So the select board really isn't aware that this condition is existing. Going through all of the stuff you see on the other drawings up above and to the left, which are part of the consultant's suggestions of raising roads. None of that has to happen, and the disruption of that is pretty mind-blowing, actually. When you have buildings below the road, doesn't make any sense to me at all. Plus you have driveways and what have you, but, so anyway. So the Black Horse Lane side, George and I walked that a couple days ago with one of the residents over there. And, got to understand the, the actual physical conditions there. That one's a little more, tricky in the long run because it involves, the state relative to, the DEP, because of crossing through an existing marsh, but it's an existing driveway. So there's the conservation side, if you will. There's the town's conservation side. There's private property involved. There's public property involved. There's a number of things there that aren't necessarily yet sorted out relative to what the state's position will be to mitigate resiliency as it relates to private property. Of course, the town isn't aware of this as an option either, so don't know what kind of negotiations you might get in with property owners. They have some skin in the game too, because if the sea level goes up, they can't even get to their home. So,
So what are next steps?
Great question. So we're sharing this. This is, all this stuff's conceptual, but this new stuff is, next steps are, I think we want to hold some public forums specifically with some of the residents, in the Cohasset Cove. It's the Cohasset Hospitality Partners, among others, and those that are affected. They've been very interested in this type of stuff to date, the people who are right involved. Likewise, Black Horse Lane, and I think we've got some good support to at least get a meeting and figure that out. We also need to meet with Brian Joyce, and who's, very, incredibly knowledgeable resource, and see, the thinking on that as well. But it's, it's really a matter of bringing to focus. It's a theoretical problem until there's a massive storm that floods everything. And then it's not a theoretical problem.
yeah, and our concern there is that basically the town just says, Brian, go hire the consultants, let's get this built. And they charge off with where they left off. And we get raised roads and all that other kind of stuff without really having had any larger discussion amongst the
Townspeople.
townspeople, particularly the people that are affected the most, without having had that vetted fully relative to cost comparisons and certainly impositions of how this stuff gets integrated into private property. You raise a road, you affect driveways, you affect the sidewalks, you affect everything. So it's
And just to,
it's a larger issue than just taking a road and saying, we'll go straight up and that's it. Because
And-
there's all this other stuff on either side.
to be fair, the folks on Summer Street and Black Horse were keenly interested in this and
Yeah.
did attend some of the open houses and meetings in the summertime.
Yeah.
And they were, And they actually asked the question like, did you only think about doing this in public lands? Because that's what it appears. And the answer was, and it wasn't a superficial answer. It was based on some of the experience that between a combination of political will and town government, our town's willing to really push for solutions that may involve partnerships with private homeowners. So it's not impractical. It's just we think it's worth looking at harder. Yes, Derek.
And, along the same lines of having a public forum and not to put the cart too far before the horse, but is that there's gotta be state or federal funding or, as opposed to just this coming out of the town's taxpayers' pockets. I gotta imagine for resiliency efforts, right?
Yeah, there will be, yeah.
There is, I mean, none of these projects are shovel ready. Even what the consultants did, and if we invite them back and they do more work, there's still another level or two of design work before you could get bidding on this. And then along with that, certainly we would explore, the town would explore grants. That's probably,
Yeah, grant
You might
paid for
be
all the
involved.
studies.
Most likely.
The town, town did receive money from the state for those studies. But the next stages would be start looking at the engineering side of it all.
Right, and this,
Woods Hole is done with whatever they are.
well, I asked that because will the state or, even federal government, will they still supply funding to continue the process, to push the process
Well,
forward?
they could, yes.
So I don't know how many miles of coastline there are in
Well,
Massachusetts.
that's, I'm also.
Affected. I mean, basically, there's gonna be money from somewhere.
Well,
Well-
I'm curious at which pace do we need to move to make sure that we're in the queue? Because I got to imagine there's other towns looking at the same issues.
There are.
I mean, Joan Moschino was at our last meeting.
That's right.
And was relatively complimentary of the progress Cohasset is making. And despite the fact that we're a wealthy town, we seem to be submitting grant requests and getting funded. So there's been some success to show and that we're moving through that. Did you have a question?
No, but I think that gentleman had a comment, but I don't want to touch upon it.
Thank you. So Jay Dons has a comment?
Yeah,
You
Jeff
have
Dons, yeah.
to-
The question is, in addition to the Gulf and Black Horse area, are there mitigation strategies considered for other areas like Stockbridge Street? The answer is the focus on this was town infrastructure and primarily the wastewater treatment plant, the public safety building, and the village infrastructure. And that was the focus. And so to that end, Stockbridge Street, Atlantic Avenue, other low-lying areas, certainly they're known to flood. That's what that Massachusetts website I just went through will show you. That's let's just say not currently the top priority of focus of this. I do want to be respectful of the time. We were ahead. Now I'm slightly behind. And I think great question on your part, Derek. Our next steps are to hold some public meetings and also engage the town, at least to explore this and take it, continue to take this. We're sort of working under the assumption that we have time, and we do until there's a storm. But it's all we can do is just keep moving it forward. And so Mike and I have been doing some of that and to the degree that I think some next steps are to hold a public forum, which will be announced, open meeting, and we'll do that with town residents in the area. And then any meeting we might have with town officials will probably be a walkthrough of these areas. And that would also be something we would invite Harbor Committee to do, but it's those type of meetings are not necessarily ones that are open meeting under an open meeting law when you're just doing a walkthrough and not deliberating. So that's what we'll be doing. Why don't we, unless there's further questions, let's move to the next topic. I'm going to stop sharing my screen. And so our next topic is oyster farming update, aquaculture in Cohasset. We have Greg Wallingford and Jamie Davenport here to present. And I guess, Greg, I would ask you to please just state your name and address and Jamie as well.
I'm Greg Wallingford, 144 Lambert's Lane, Cohasset here.
Okay,
And I'm Jamie Davenport, 16 Booth Hill Lane, Booth Hill Road, Situate, Massachusetts.
Great. Well, welcome and thanks for coming.
Thank you.
The floor is yours.
Is it possible to share my
You
screen?
should be able to just share.
Well, Jamie, I want to thank you all for having us. I know I spoke with you a month ago and I thought it was important that we come before the committee and just give you an update of what's happening out there and answer questions the people in the room and
Is this mic close enough to them?
I was wondering the
Yeah, you
same.
may want to need to speak up.
okay, sorry.
I'm not sure.
Or-
For me, because I'm deaf.
Slack is there.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, so I guess
You guys have
it's
good
good.
voices.
Speak
Yeah,
loudly and
loud.
I can be loud too. I
Like you.
I have a tendency to mumble sometimes. Thank you for calling that out.
They will pick it up.
Let me just ask, for those of you attending online, if you can't hear, please send a note in the chat and we'll monitor that, but we'll assume that you can hear otherwise.
So again, I'm Greg Wallingford. My partner Jamie and I own and operate Situate Oyster Company. We are one of the 3 1-acre farms that are currently in operation in the Outer Harbor. We began August 3rd of 2023, so we've been in operation for just over a year and a half, or around a year and a half, and are starting to finally get oysters harvested. As of November, we've had a few thousand and have been selling them to local restaurants in the area. So that's exciting. A bulk of our oysters that we have will be sold in the spring and the summer of this year. And currently we have between 1.2 million oysters out there. That is seed and oysters of varying degrees of maturity. The other farms, I'm not exactly sure, but one has a little bit less and the other has about the same as we do. So about total, maybe 2.5, 3 million oysters out there totally.
That's that many oysters in a 1 acre plot.
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah, we haven't utilized our entire acre yet either. So, but I'll hand it over to Jamie. He's got photos of the operation, and again, we're here to answer questions.
Great.
So Greg mentioned to me that this meeting would be taking place and then it'd be a good opportunity for for us to meet and show you guys what we've been doing for the past year and a half. In my experience in the past 5 to 7 years in trying to get this farm up and running, I found that the biggest threat to the whole project and just in general is the lack of communication, and people not being aware of what's going on and what things may eventually look like. So I thought this would be a great opportunity to show you guys visually how things look and show you a bit of our process as well. So
Yeah, thank you.
here on the screen we have Outer Cohasset Harbor, and then you'll see an orange rectangle. That was arrived at by inputting the 4 corner points coordinates of our farm. So our 1 acre farm is right where you see it, and then there are 2 more 1 acre leases that are moving northeast away, towards the glades on the east side.
Mhm. So you're the one closest.
Closest as you're
Yes.
on the approach from Cohasset Channel.
Okay.
Ours is the first one you would arrive at. And the distance between our northwest corner and the northern edge of the break wall is roughly 1,600 feet, just to give some perspective. And it looks like it's probably about 1,500 feet from the shore of Bassing Beach. So the Wall Street Journal did an article over the summer, and the photographer who came down from Boston to document and to take pictures was nice enough to send a drone up, and she got some great shots. So these are due to her. So this is looking out from the harbor out towards the glades and the farms. This is at high tide, I think later that day when we met. So this is an overhead view of our farm. You can kind of see the first string of, so each string of cages is roughly 200 feet long. That first, a little bit more kind of haggard looking section is the first 3 strings of cages that we put out in the prior season. And then we kind of, perfected our process a little bit more, and those southern strings that you see there, they're a little more straight. that was put in this year. And then I think I've got a shot further down, but I think we have maybe 1 or 2 more strings that we installed after this photograph, and that's pretty much to date what our farm looks like. Roughly 250 6-chambered cages. I'll show you in a second. This is facing the glades, and you can see the 2 other farms. I think that the space in between ours and the cages that you see is the farm that belongs to Mike Cotter, but his is in what is in, it's a little bit lower on the, it's a little bit deeper right there, so his cages aren't showing. This is looking back at the channel there. And then there's
And what
White
tide,
Rock.
is this dead low tide?
This is actually a pretty impressively low tide. It was probably about maybe a half a foot in between a half a foot and a foot below normal that day. This is not how our farm looks typically on average. It's another wide shot too. This is relatively recent. I think this was late in the fall, so this is about the size of the farm now. As you can see, the cages that are closest to us on that western side, as it moves up to the right of that picture, those tend to be out of the water a little bit more, and they definitely get hammered by the waves. So you can see how there's a bit of zigzag action. We're taking steps to make sure that we shore that kind of stuff up and make sure that the cages don't go anywhere. This is just a cool little shot of what you can kind of see out there. This was probably in December, I think, right?
Yeah,
A nice
a lot of deer, a lot of seal, a lot of bald
Deer, yeah.
eagles out there.
yeah, that was a young doe. So this is part of the process. So as farmers, we purchase oyster seed from hatcheries, and we either go and pick it up at the hatchery or we have them delivered. So this particular delivery is from Fisher's Island Oyster Farm in Long Island Sound, New York. It comes with burlap to keep it moist and a cold pack to keep it cold. And as long as you deploy it within the first 24 hours, then you're liable to have success with your crop. In this box is probably between 50 and 75,000 oysters. They're 9 to 13 millimeters. That's a handful right there. So there's a range of size from the smallest to the largest. It's almost like, holding like a handful of granola. So what we do, this is my son Reese, he's 12, and he was helping us this day. This was probably in August, I believe.
Yeah.
We have to identify how much 2,000 animals weighs. So we just take little sample amounts and count them out by hand, and then arrive at a certain weight. And so in this instance, on this day, these 2,000 oysters weighed 36 ounces, a little over 2 pounds. As an adult, I think probably about a dozen oysters would weigh about 2 pounds. So that's a little perspective. So we fill these square meshed, boxed out plastic bags. We fill them with 2,000 oysters in each bag. That's a shot of the inside of the bag. It's really like just the bottom 2 to 3 inches of that bag is full of seed. We load them all up. Looks like we're gonna need a bigger boat. Bring them down to Parker Ave. And then we come around the corner and we put those mesh bags inside these cages, which measure 5'10" long by I think 36 inches wide and 16 inches tall.
Mhm.
And we attach them using 9/16 sinking line, which has I think it's like an 8,000 pound tensile strength. We began using these little stainless steel clips to keep those cages in place. But unfortunately, after removing our farm for the winter last year and then deploying it in March, right after deploying, we had a 2-day nor'easter that sent the bulk of our 75 cages at the time southward onto the tidal flats towards Bassing Beach. It took us 4 days to retrieve all those cages. That storm was good because it tested us and it gave us an idea of how successful our engineering was. And so we found that the weak points of our system were these little stainless steel clips that would twist and come off. And we also had placed our strings of cages too close together. So if a couple of cages came free, it would sever the line in front of it, and then they would all just go. So we deleted those clips and just actually used little lengths of line and we widened the lanes in between each of our strings. And since then, we've had a lot of action out there since back in March. We haven't really been tested by any major storms, but we've had some pretty good winds in the past, in the past year, and we're doing pretty good. So
What is the riskiest depth of water combined with a bad storm for you?
so that 4 days that we had, like 70 mile an hour winds, was that the storm? I heard that there were as high as 20-foot seas in the bay. Larry Trowbridge, who's a lobsterman, mentioned that storm that sent our cages back in March, took them off the farm. That was because there was just such a volume of water. It's not the quick storms with high winds that really affect us. It's those slow moving, churning 2-3 day storms with sustained winds that really kind of get you, because it'll just kind of keep picking away at you. We also, upgraded our anchors. So those lines are attached to 60-inch helical anchors. It's like a galvanized rod with a disc that you basically screw down. It goes lower and lower until it's only about this far off the ground. The rope will break before that anchor comes free. We started using those in the ends, but we were only using 30 inchers intermediately, and those things just pull right out because it's not far enough down. So now the smallest size that we use is 4 feet. We use 60-inch on the ends and in the middle, and then we use 48 inchers intermediately, and those aren't going anywhere. And we also upgraded the size of our line from half inch to 9/16. So we think we've solved it for the most part. I mean, obviously, Mother Nature will do what she will, but we just try and do our best. And the good news is if anything does break free, it's not going to go out to sea and become trash for the ocean. It's going to move southward, and we'll find it eventually. It's just can be kind of tricky. This is my son Reese helping us deploy that day. This is a shot of what it looks more typically like. This was probably either like as the tide was coming in or going out. But a lot of times if it's a half a foot above normal, the tide, or a foot above normal, this is what the farm looks like. So I'd say in a given month, there's probably only about 7 or 8 days where you really see much of anything.
And those cages are standing up, by the way.
Those cages are standing straight up, yeah. That's how we position them when we're coming out with bags, to put bags inside of them. And then we flop them back down. This is just a cool, pretty, evening sunset shot. And so after the oysters that we deploy have been soaking for a couple of months, we'll go out and we will dump them out into a vessel, check on them and see how much they've grown in those 2 months. In this instance, I think they had probably maybe tripled in size. We did this by hand for this Wall Street Journal article, but really on a larger scale, we have a machine that we run these things through. In this instance, you take a screen and you put all the oysters on them, and then you just kind of shake it up and down, and the water suction sucks the smaller oysters through the mesh. And the ones that are retained on that screen get moved up to the next larger aperture bag. So we start up with a 6 millimeter mesh bag, and then we move the next ones up to a 9 millimeter, and then do a 12 millimeter until they're about the size of for harvest. So this oyster was deployed in August of this year, and I believe this was September. And so you can see how they grow. There's that opaque mass that's that's oyster that was the previous growth, but that translucent edge that's about 1/2 of an inch, 3/8 of an inch to 1/2 an inch, it's like fingernails. So it kind of grows really brittle. You could break it off with your fingers, and then once the oyster moves into that space and inhabits that space, it hardens up, and then it just keeps doing that over and over again throughout the season until it's large enough. See, that's kind of like I was testing to see if that oyster if an oyster would fall through that mesh. This was in November. These were the first oysters to be consumed. Joby Norton at Mulaney's Seafood Market. Actually, this was the first time they were consumed by the Shellfish Committee. But then in a public setting, Joby Norton put on an event for the select board members and the Waterways Committee members, anybody who had a hand in helping the project along and get us off the ground. We invited for a first taste. And so I think that was wasabi with melon, I think, on it.
Yeah.
It's very good. A Rockefeller, just straight up naked. And that right there is a shot of Greg, myself, Mike Cotter in the middle, Larry Cotter next to him, sorry, Larry Trowbridge next to him, and Sean Burke is Larry's partner. So that represents the three farms right there. And that's just the sunset shot of the another sunset shot. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
That's terrific.
So we, like Greg mentioned, we purchased, I think it was a little over 500,000 seed in 2023, 750,000 seed this past season in 2024. We intend, it's our intention to purchase 1 million seed, and then we'll see where we're at. You know, we'll see, maybe do the same the next. I mean, there's only so much oysters that you can grow on an acre. You know, and you have to have the infrastructure in place and people helping you do it. Right now, it's just Greg and I. Eventually, we intend to hire a farm manager and some employees, but we may stick with around 1 million for the next year or two. We'll see how it goes. But so far, we've been successful. The weather hasn't been, too nasty to us. I know there's something out there waiting for us, right? We just have to be ready for it. It's just interesting to see all the life that's kind of hanging out around the farm. You know, there was a lot of talk of industrial oyster farming, and we were going to, ruin the ecosystem and the environment. And I would argue that we've seen in the past year and a half that we've done quite the opposite. You know, there's a lot of we kind of created an artificial reef where our farm is, and you see a lot of little fish. Baby eels, horseshoe crabs. There's a lot of
Yeah.
life there.
I can't remember the last time I saw a horseshoe crab, and we've seen some on our farm.
Mhm.
It was pretty amazing. Have you
I
seen
can-
them out there?
Nope, I have not
Okay.
seen them anywhere else, so that's some pretty significant.
When was the harvest moon? Was that in October or November?
Yeah.
Yeah, so we were out, we went out late in the day, and we didn't think we were gonna get much work done, and the harvest moon lit the entire farm up, and we were out there, I think, until 8:39 working, and it was just
And it was almost like daylight
beautiful,
because it was so
and it
bright.
was-
Yeah. Just trying to find a picture of something. The one thing that we're finding, there's a lot of kind of pests out there. There's stuff that grow like the tunicate. That seems to be our biggest enemy right now.
What would you call it?
Or the orange tunicate. It grows on the oysters like a jelly. It's not just orange, there's like multiple colors like beige and did I just see it?
But it's a
Yeah,
Botryloid.
there it is, right there.
Okay.
Look at it. It's pretty. I mean, it's like a flower almost, like little flowers. You see that? But it's terrible because it's not parasitic, no. I mean, it grows on top of things, on top of the bags. It fouls things up. So it's,
And most of the oysters don't have it because it's pretty rough out there. They get tumbled pretty
yeah,
good.
but
we do have
the
some.
gear gets it on it. That
Yeah.
seems to be our biggest problem. Other than the weather, it's just the fouling because we're in the subtidal region. So from the mean low tide and beyond. So they're in the water so much, they don't get a chance to air dry. You know, if we were in the intertidal space just below where we are, we'd have a little easier time of it. Anyways,
Good.
Yeah, so
Well, let's open it
Open
up
up
to
for
questions. Who has questions? And we're also, we'll be monitoring online if there are questions.
Jimmy, how are they growing here versus the farm in Dennis? East Dennis.
I think it's hard to tell, but about the same, if not faster. But depending on we got seed this year at different times, so it's hard to tell. We'll have a clearer picture next year, but it's about the same, maybe a little faster because they're in the water longer.
I mean, typically it takes 18 to 24 months to go from seed to plate, and our first batch came out in like 16, 17 months.
Yeah, those
Those
were
were-
the fast growers. It was about 4,000 or 5,000, like 3-inch oysters, and then we
Yeah.
probably have about 10,000 what people call petites or cocktail size,
Mm.
which are 2.5 inches. So, but those are the fast growers of next year's crop, really. So,
I'll throw some out. What's a typical day during a busy time in the harbor for you guys? During a busy time of the harvest or the growing, what is?
well, right now we've been fortunate because we haven't had like harvesting thrown into the mix where you have deadlines that you have to make and orders coming in and you have to tend to the removing biofouling from the bags or whatever, that'll be next year. But this season was just the volume of seed that just the two of us had to screen until we took a bunch down to my farm on the Cape and used this machine that I have, that it's like a tube sorter that you send the oysters through on one side. The tube spins, and then there's multiple size holes, and they fall through the successively, larger size holes and end up in totes. So once we, I'm like, what, this is ridiculous. Let's just, do this, let's work smart, not hard. We got through a lot more, but we had a lot of days where it was like 10, 12-hour days of the two of us just in the driveway,
Splitting seed and sorting.
splitting seed and sorting, and it's a lot, yeah. But it wasn't just that. It was if it was just that, it would have been more manageable. But I'm spending evenings and mornings making up bags and putting PVC runners on the bottom of our cages so that they can take the wear from the cobble bottom more easier. Making up tying the lines that we attach the cages to have loops that are tied into them at each of the corners of the rope. So you can't just stretch line out. You have to make it all up ahead of time. So it was all the little stuff, and the $80,000 we spent, when we're not seeing a penny, there was a lot. It's the startup is difficult. I think we'll have it a little easier next year, even with the additional labor of having to harvest oysters and sell them at the same time as you're trying to tend to the smaller stuff. And
our break even will be
split
this
seed.
year, which is nice.
Yeah,
Our break even will be this year.
Okay.
we hope, yeah,
Yeah.
knock on.
What's your experience at Parker Avenue? Are you trailering a boat to Parker Avenue every day?
Correct.
We
Yeah,
do,
so we
yeah.
trailer, we just park there. I'm a resident, so we park it there, and it works out great to just move in and off the farm. And
Yeah.
I think it's better than actually having a mooring in the harbor.
In some ways, because you load up the boat with whatever you're going to remove from the farm and work off site at, and then just trailer right off and then put it right back, instead of
Yeah.
having to bring a boat from a mooring up to a truck, unload it, load it, unload it, all that stuff. So
Logistically, we can't work in and around the harbor because we don't have any of our apparatus there.
Mm.
So, going directly to the facility with the boat, with the bags is just.
you get more
work for
done
us.
by taking product off of the farm and then resubmerging it the next day, or even a couple days later. On my Cape farm, which is intertidal, where we have 4, 5, 6 hours a day to work, a lot of guys work right straight out there. And I know Larry did a lot of his work out there too. He's a lobsterman, so he's used to dealing in deeper water, and so he'd just stay out there for 8 hours, and it didn't matter how deep the water was. He would just put a wetsuit on and hop in or whatever. But our experience with Parker Avenue was positive, I think, overall. I mean, even in the middle of August on an 85-degree day, during the week, you didn't see much traffic. There was not a whole lot of people coming in and out of Parker Ave. And I don't like to typically work weekends. I like to spend time with my 3 boys and my wife. So, I mean, I'm sure it's busier on the weekends, but we never really had any issues with having to wait very long to deploy our boat. No altercations with angry residents. I think that overall, the most people that we ran into were looking forward to it, from what I experienced.
And
And so-
motors and. stand-up paddlers.
17-foot boat is that the size you have?
Yes.
It's the size I have, but it's not the ideal size.
Oh.
We were trying to build a 24-foot high density polyethylene boat, HDPE, like the
Waypoint in the harbor.
who owns that?
Black.
CMI, yeah, CMI's plastic boat. Yeah. So I was working with the owner of that company prior to that, when they bought that boat. But he got busy with building a boat for some company at a Quincy for like $1.6 million, and so we're still looking forward to doing something like that. But we're managing. Although, for 2 people, you can pretty much load onto that boat what 2 guys can get through in one day, anyways. You probably even 3. It's really like when you're trying to move, like say we were going to remove the farm for the winter. That's when it'd be nicer to have a bigger boat. It's a versatile
Did
size.
you remove the farm for the winter?
No, and I didn't because the cold kind of snuck up on me. I'm actually still concerned with getting my Cape farm off. The past few days have been kind of brutal. We had a wall of sand move across our farm on the Cape in Dennis, and bury about 400 of my oyster bags under as much as 6 inches of sand. So I spent Friday and then yesterday and Monday trying to unearth that stuff. Yeah, we bought a gas powered trash pump, semi trash pump, like that can move large volumes of water. 158 gallons per minute comes out of one end of the nozzle. So we bought one of those things and went out there with like a fire hose and just blasted sand off of all the bags. Luckily, they're dormant right now, so that even though they were encased in sand for as much as 4 or 5 days, I'm hoping I didn't lose any, because that's probably about $150,000 worth of oysters that was under the earth for several days. So crossing my fingers, but yeah. So the farm in Situate technically wouldn't need to be removed, as far as it very rarely ices up out there because of the movement, the flow in and out. What's more concerning is the storms. Removing the bags from the cages and leaving the cages out there would be much more preferable, because the water will flow through those cages a lot better than with the mass of the bags. But the fact that they end up settling a few inches into the mud and don't move very much anyways kind of aids us, So I think we're still going to remove a portion of the farm, but not all of it. We did leave probably about 80 bags out over last winter, and that was the one problem, was that they kind of got mudded in, like the bottom chambers of the cages, the bags that were in those chambers got kind of muddy, and we did lose probably about 20 or 30,000 seed from that. But we could like remove all the bottom bags, and it would remove some of the mass from the cages, and we could leave the top ones in there, and it would cut down on, we probably have about 1,600 bags of oysters out there. So, and with this 17-foot boat, we can only get about 200 per run. And that's, yeah, we're still trying to figure that out, but I'll have my farm off and off on the Cape over the weekend. And so we'll turn our attention to that,
Yeah, we've been
So-
really fortunate with the weather too. I was out there yesterday. It was fairly calm, cold, but calm.
Yeah.
You mentioned that you envision hiring additional employees.
Mm.
And is that simply due to volume, or is that as the oysters mature and you start to have a harvesting and a planting operation?
Both.
How does,
Yeah.
how do you envision that playing out in 2025, for instance?
Well, I've been farming for 17 years, and I definitely paid my dues as somebody who was like boots on the ground every day, carrying out the grunt work. I'm 47 years old. My lower back is starting to go, and just, he's older than I am. So, we definitely need a farm manager who can, and a partner. Like, you can't just send one person out there to do. So it's going to be
Yeah.
two. We'll end up hiring 2 people. And then we'll oversee, the buying and the selling. And we hope to expand to become a wholesaler and be able to sell direct to consumer. Possibly open up a food truck or a small low overhead restaurant. We'd like to cater, do raw bar catering. So there's plenty of opportunities for us to expand, and we know we can't do it ourselves.
We touched
Both
on
from a
tours
labor
as well.
perspective.
Farm.
Farm tours would be nice too,
So-
yeah.
So
So,
there's some,
What tides can you work at, and when can't you be there?
well, you can pretty much be out there during any time, as long as it's not too nasty out there. On a 2 foot above, or 2.5 foot above normal tide, I'll be standing up to about stomach deep in water. And when you lift one of those cages up onto its edge, onto its end, it's like right at the top of the water.
At
You
high,
can work in that. It's not ideal.
at high tide?
Low tide. So I'm sorry. Yeah.
I
So
was wondering, yeah.
at the low tide, a low tide can either be as much as 2.5 feet
Yeah.
above normal or 2.5 feet below normal,
Yes.
typically. We can work in any of those conditions, but what's most ideal is between like a 1/2 foot above normal and like a couple feet below. Although it is kind of a pain in the butt to have a minus 2 foot tide and have to park the boat 200 feet,
Yeah.
north of our farm and walk. There's something to be said for being
Yeah.
able to bring it right up,
But so, just so I understand, at high tide, you can't work with.
I mean, not unless you set up like Larry intends to set up, where he has 2 buoys on either end of a trawl, and then he can lift each cage up to the side of the boat and work. But that's just, we're not really interested in that. We're able to keep our runs, our lines of cages much more tight and in place the way we do it. I'd rather have that safety and security of everything anchored down than to have like 2 anchors on one end and everything else kind of floating, But But yeah, so it's all surrounding the low tide.
Okay.
We're also able to put more oysters on the farm by setting it up the way we do as
To have
opposed
higher
to.
density, yeah.
Yeah,
So we have like roughly 1.2 million oysters, 400,000 of them more juvenile and adult, and the rest like, you know, babies that have probably 500 to 1,000 per bag. And roughly 250 to 275 cages, and we're only using about half of our farm. So we could of course, the further north we go, the more that it's in the water all the time. It makes it more difficult for you to see what you have and get anything done. It would be ideal if we could expand a little bit to the south, but you know, we'll see.
What other questions are there?
I suppose that would be my question. What is your business plan for expansion?
In a perfect world, I would like to have one more acre in the intertidal space just southeast of our farm. Beyond that, we wouldn't require any more than that. I'm pretty sure that Mike Cotter and Larry Trowbridge feel the same way. So in a perfect world for us, there would be 6 acres out there. We've said it before that the 30, 40 acres, you know, maps that have been put up was never anybody's plan. It was
Never considered.
It was never considered. That was like an overall, what could one do if someone wanted to do something out there? But then again, when you factor in weather and the height of tides and all that, it narrows it all right down. And, you know, the bottleneck of local resources like Parker Ave or like coming around the bend like Larry does from, you know, 5 miles south of here. And there's not a whole lot of people that really would undertake something like this too. So I don't think that the town of Situate has the stomach for anything more than a small handful of farmers, you know. So our lease, can you believe it, actually ends in June because, you know, it's considered a pilot program. The state doesn't use the term pilot, so that pilot program phrase is used kind of internally in Situate, meaning, you know, let's see how it goes for the first couple of years and then go from there. I'm hoping that they've deemed it successful enough for us to be extended. The typical lease for, you know, for oyster farms is 5 to 10 years. So I'm hoping that we can go to the table and extend our lease that ends in June, another 5 years. And then, you know, the town will evaluate the success of it and take any input from local stakeholders and find out whether they find that it's successful enough for us to continue. I have a question for you guys. So have you guys, any of, you know, I know you guys are all liaisons for other committees. Have you had any input from local residents or stakeholders, negative or positive?
I'll speak. I haven't, other than what is sort of in the press and, you know, with the town select board getting involved with it, it's, and it all moving to executive session. That to me has sort of been that has been the conversation, and it's essentially the lack of conversation because it's all tied up in litigation. That's my view of it. So I was very interested to see. I've been out in my little 12-foot boat at low tide, observing what I could see. You know, and we can see. I think anybody boating in Cohasset can see the lines of buoys, which we're curious about. But I don't have anything to report myself, negative or positive, about the actual operation.
Because we've come into contact and interacted with folks from the rowing clubs out there every day. You know what I mean? We see them.
That's Cohasset Maritime Institute.
Yeah, we see those guys all the time, and we're very friendly with them, and they're very friendly with us. So we've had a positive experience with them.
On this, so I do not want to make a representation that we have a position.
Yeah.
Right.
But my experience with the people that are rowing has been a positive one.
Yep.
You know, personally.
They're pretty nice.
Yeah, and Lisa's the CMI representative.
Yeah. And the sailing club.
So,
The sailing club, we've also come in contact with. There was a time when they were all like a little north of our farms, and there was a stray boat that was kind of heading south towards our farms, and we were actually heading off for the day, and one of the motorboats that kind of follows them around and makes sure they're safe. I was approaching them, and they thought we were approaching them to say like, "Hey, get off our farm," and I was actually approaching them to say, you can go, by all means, you can sail through there as long as there's enough water to do so, so I think that our interactions with them have been positive as well, so.
Yeah, and the kids that are on their 420s, Optis, and some of the other smaller sailboats, they can sail right over them at high tides, 8 to 11
Or
feet.
half tide probably,
Yeah.
yeah.
So is this full-time work you sound like?
Yeah.
For me, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I was a financial advisor for 22 years. I sold that block of business off to one of the other brokers in my firm, and I own this business and another one. We both intend to do this
Okay.
full time. And we are doing it full time, so.
You showed a picture of, the successful first commercial.
Yeah.
I mean, those were a couple of bags.
Yeah.
Yeah.
How much really did you have much of a harvest in 2024, or was those 2 bags sort of the celebration of the harvest?
So I think they were 200 oysters. No, those are 200 oysters total. So each one of those bags had 100 oysters in them. We sold, I think, about 5,000 of that size. So 50 of those bags. And then, I think we've sold about 2,000 petite or cocktail size, which is like 2.5 inches. And we probably have another 4,000 or 5,000. So totally basically like about 100 bags, 150 bags. Yeah.
And is your expectation for 2025 to be exponentially more than?
It is, yeah. So that's one other thing I didn't touch on is that like the success of the farm should really be a major part of that should be considered is like how do they grow, and how did we have much mortality? And so we purchased 550,000 seed in August of 2023, and a FSA Farm Service Agency auditor came out in July and helped us quantify our farm by taking counts of each bag and then counting up all the bags that we have. And he figured that we have at that point we had roughly 400,000 oysters still alive of 550,000, which is a mortality of roughly 25%, which is good. I think the state average is actually between 30, it's a little over 30. For insurance purposes, the state average is 50%. They believe that 50% of most farmers' product ends up dying, which is just not true. So it's similar, if not better, than the Cape Farm. I think it's actually a little better, with lower mortality because they're in the water longer. They're not baking in the sun and struggling against the air. So of that, the 400,000 that is still alive, they won't all go to market next year, but I'm anticipating we should probably be able to sell at least 300,000 pieces, if not more.
How do you compare the growing conditions in this space, this acre you have, to your Cape Farm? Better, worse, different?
Different, I
Definitely
think,
different.
yeah. The Cape Farm is a little easier in some aspects because we have 5, sometimes 6 hours of low tide on the farm to work with, and we can also drive 4-wheel drive vehicles out on the farm. So you can have like four 4-wheel drive pickup trucks that you have an off-road permit for and just drive. You can't easily go out and get 4 boats, you know what I mean? It's just logistically, it's a lot easier, that farm. But I do feel like we're definitely more unprotected. Like my Cape Farm is on the bicep of Cape Cod Bay. There's really no protection. You can see white caps off in the distance, threatening you as you're standing there.
You're on the bay side?
The bay side, yeah.
Where it has a very long tide.
And you can walk for about 2 miles and be in like shin deep water because Cape Cod Bay is just like one giant sandbar. So yeah, it's just a different, I'm getting used to like a boat-based operation, and there's some aspects about that are easier or that I feel better about. I definitely feel better about the health of the oysters in Scituate because if they're underwater most of the time, there's not much that can kill them. On the farm, on my Cape Farm, when it's 17 degrees out and the wind's whipping 40 miles an hour across the farm and I've got my farm still out there, it's a little, I've experienced more than one sleepless night.
Yeah. I mean, our mortality is lower than the statewide mortality, which is like 27%.
It is,
We're
yeah.
floating around 18 to 20% mortality. So it's been good in that respect.
So is the oyster variety that you have is the same as the one in Duxbury?
Yeah, so
How many different varieties of oysters are there? And
there's really I think there's 3. There's there's an eastern, like an Atlantic oyster, it's called Crassostrea virginica, and there's a western that's like a west coast that I think is Crassostrea pacifica or Pacific. And then there's the Gygus, Crassostrea gygus, which I think is a European oyster. That's like three main varieties. Really, they're all the same species, just different strains genetically of the same species. And then they take on the flavor of the nutrients and the minerals in the water in which they're grown. Like a grape has a certain terroir, a taste of the soil that it's grown in, which gives the wine its flavor. Oysters have a merroir, of the sea, that gives the oyster a distinct taste. So,
Derek.
That was great. Thanks for the overview. Really
Sure.
appreciate that. And don't take this question the wrong way, but I'm actually genuinely curious. If Cohasset's resources are being utilized for a commercial operation to the tax benefit of Situate,
Mhm.
How does that work out? And I'm just thinking overall with the resources of Cohasset.
Hmm.
Do you know what I mean?
I do, because I think that if we are expanding and hiring more employees that are going to be working around here, buying lunch, refueling their boat, refueling their car, I think that that's a way that we can help offset that.
Plus, there's a multiplier
infrastructure.
effect with with local economies. If you see what happened in like Duxbury and Wellfleet to those towns as a result of the aquaculture programs that are there, I mean, they've done, wonderfully. And the other thing is like we're using Situate resources, really. I mean, it's in Situate water and not Situate.
But he means
land.
like using Parker Ave, the Parker Ave boat ramp. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But I don't really think, we're not really putting a monetary drain, I don't think, on Parker Ave. You know what I mean? I don't think that we're really doing a whole lot of draining of money. And also once the oysters are flowing and we have more of them, so right now they're only in a couple of places like the Oysterman in Situate. So the Oysterman in Duxbury expanded and opened up a new location in Greenbush in Situate. And our oyster is kind of like the house oyster right now. And also they've been featured at Galley and at Mill Wharf. But we fully intend when Split Rock opens back up to be serving them at Split Rock and any of the local restaurants that want, or in the cases at the local, shops. So that's a way that I feel we can offset that by drawing people in. I mean, it's not out of the ordinary to have people travel a half an hour, 45 minutes to a town close to them to experience the local, cuisine or take a tour on an oyster farm, you know what I mean? Like, I think that we can draw people to this region and help offset that.
Good answer. Thank you.
So how do you market these? What do you call them?
So they're
Oysters,
currently
what do you call
the
them?
Situate Sailor, but I'd like to have the Sailor as the like the 3-inch or larger select or regular oyster, and then call the petite possibly a skipper, maybe. Like, that I figured like the town name, the town mascot, Cohasset has the skipper and Situate has the sailor.
Oh, okay.
We talked about the Psycho oyster, but I've already floated that out there and so far nobody's bid on that yet. That would be like hyper local. I don't think you could sell a Psycho oyster in Boston, but you might be able to do it in Cohasset or something.
We're closing in on our time. Are there, we're actually closed on our time.
Okay.
What other questions? Jack, do you have any questions? Bruce? Any questions? I think we're just listening online, it looks like, but a good crowd. You don't have to.
So you think the oysters come off the farm or farm comes out of the water, where do they go?
So if we were to take the farm off for the winter to escape the most violent months of the year, January and February, we bought a 50-foot like decommissioned reefer trailer, like a refrigerated trailer, like that a semi truck, will pull along. That's no longer really roadworthy for day-to-day use. So you can typically purchase one for a couple $1,000s. So we bought one from somebody in Taunton, and it's so Sean Harris Enterprises. He owns 30 acres on First Parish Road behind the post office and the gas station and all the little boats that are for sale right there. And he's been nice enough to rent us a spot for that trailer. and for us to park our boat. So basically, you take all the bags off and put them inside this insulated trailer. And even if you have a fluctuation in temperature through the winter, even if it gets down to like 15 degrees for a couple of days, you have probably 20 to 30,000 pounds of small organisms, you know, that are kind of holding temperature, right? So it would take extremes in either direction for an extended period of time to move the needle. Ideally, if they're between 33 and 34 and 38 degrees Fahrenheit, they're fine, dormant, out of the water for months.
So dormant,
Yeah.
Do they need nutrients? How long can they?
No, so much like a camel will, you know, drink a lot of water to make its way across the desert and fill up its hump. Oysters in the fall and September start to gather up extra sugars, glycogen in their system to make in preparation as the water temperature is going down towards 47, 48 degrees, which is the point at which their nervous system shuts down. And so they may pump water, but they're not actually taking on any nutrients. So so if you've ever heard that it's best to eat an oyster in months ending in ER, some people used to believe that that's because if you were like in Manhattan in the 1800s, you wouldn't want to eat an oyster in July because it's been sitting on someone's cart and, you know, the weather or whatever. But I think it's more because in September, October, November, December, they've become more plump and fat. You know, they've been fattened up by all the sugars they've been taking in, so they can make it through that dormancy.
How long would they stay then?
I know people that have had, one of my friends at the Cape once had an oyster that he had like on the concrete shelf of his basement for 7 months. It was June and it was still alive. And I'll actually go one step further. There's a guy who owns a restaurant in Dennisport called the Oyster Company, and he has his own farm, but he also buys a lot of oysters from the farmers around him. He told my father that he had oysters that were out of water for 7 months and they grew a quarter of an inch. So, because it was always, we take our oysters off, we put them back out, wait a couple weeks for them to filter through, and then go find more to harvest because we haven't had any money for a little while. And I'm always like, how the hell do I have so many oysters? You know what I mean? And that might have answered my question because they may still be continuing to grow while they're out of the water and dormant. Yeah.
And then how long will they, so they're out of the water, you bring them back in the spring, presumably, I guess, right?
Yeah.
And then you experience mortality?
There's always some. Yeah. It's usually like 5%. If you're lucky, 5 to 10% at most.
And
It
that,
depends on your conditions in the trailer.
18-20% mortality in general.
Total, yeah.
Is that usually when they're seed or just along?
It
the
is
way?
more when they're seed, yeah. The
They're young,
large
they
portion of
die.
the mortality is when they're below, when they're like smaller than an inch. As they get a little older, they get better and better. But it also has to do with how clean the water is. And I don't mean that from like a you know, runoff nitrogen perspective. I mean from diseases that affect oysters and not people. Like, so there's always some measure of a disease that affects oysters called dermo. In most waters up and down the eastern seaboard, in Duxbury, they have a disease called MSX, which actually wreaks a lot of havoc on their mortality. Dermo doesn't really cause that much. It's usually only like 5%. We get our oysters and dentists tested every year, and they're always right around the same intensities of dermo. And I think one other, we had our oysters tested in Scituate both last year when they were tiny, and this year when they had been soaking for a lot longer and were much larger, more meat to test. And there's nothing out there. There are no shellfish diseases present in Scituate and Cohasset waters, which is really good.
Let me ask, when Bassing's Beach is closed for swimming due to E. coli issues that the state issues, what's the effect on oysters?
So is it that north side of the beach that's closed, or the side that's in the inner cove?
It's the
It's the inner harbor, yeah. So if the water was, if it was closed for swimming on that side, then it's a good chance that it would be closed for consumption of raw shellfish as well. Due to like whatever E. coli or whatnot. But it's, to my knowledge, I don't think anything that out there has been shut down at all, ever. Because of the flow, that just fresh influx of water, you know.
Okay. Thank you.
Do you want to make any suggestions for us for making things safer out there for you guys, employees, future employees? That was something came up last meeting. And maybe working with fishing partnership or anything? Should we be doing trainings?
I mean, I think it would be good to come together with other stakeholders and talk and find out what they think. From our perspective, I mean, I feel pretty safe out there. I would like to actually thank Lori for helping my friend Mike Cotter, who unfortunately tied his boat off to the stern a couple months ago because it would put the bow of his boat closer to where he wanted to toss his cages off into his farm. And he turned around and his boat was taking on water. And it sank. And rather than go directly to Lori, he came to me. I think part of that was because of the relationship that our two towns have had over the past couple of years, which I understand is starting to repair itself. But if he had gone to her, she probably would have saved his boat. But even though it was a couple hours after it started taking on water, we showed up at Government Island, and there was also a pretty big lack of communication there from the Situate PD. They unfortunately didn't notify Cohasset. So I was standing there with the Situate police officer when, 4 or 5 EMTs, a couple of cop cruisers all came showing up, and Lori came running out, what's going on? And nobody had notified her. So that's partially our fault, but it's also partially the police department's fault. But even that being said, she jumped into action, grabbed her pump, grabbed an employee, shot out there and tried to do her best to maybe save that boat. Unfortunately, it wasn't salvageable. I just wanted to thank her again for doing that.
So we roll.
Thank you very much for the presentation. Very informative.
Thank you for
Thank
having
you
us.
for having us. Yeah.
We're at time. Is there any other topics to bring before tonight's meeting? Hearing none, can I have a motion to adjourn?
Second.
All in favor?
All in
Aye.
favor?
I.
Aye. Thank you for meeting. Thank you for attending online.
Thank you.